Congratulations. Well, I think we will go ahead and get started. We are in the process of doing some very focused forums on particular topics, and today student engagement, retention, and all of the things that we need to look at as a community will be our topic. But I have a couple of announcements that I want to make before we get started. The first is that we are in the process of looking at our performance contracts with the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, and what you will be seeing in the next several weeks, and probably actually the end of this month, is a recommendation for our campus of the types of metrics that the CCAG will then hold us accountable for. Now, some people would say, why are you doing this while budgets continue to be cut? And it's part of what is the state's accountability metrics. So what we're trying to do is carefully select metrics that reflect the direction that the campus, in fact, wants to go, and the campus direction that will actually propel us forward in a positive fashion. So I will be reporting those back to the campus within 2 or 3 weeks, and you will see that they relate in large measure to today's topics, because the state of Colorado is very focused on producing more degrees for science, engineering, technology, mathematics, etc. It is also very focused on closing the achievement gap. The state achievement gap is much, much larger than the UCCS achievement gap at graduation. And in fact, in this past year, some of our at-risk populations actually exceeded the graduation rate of our majority population. But we do have some areas where we also need to continue to work. So you're going to be seeing that, you're going to be hearing about it. There is some consternation because, of course, the state is not providing performance funding for this sort of activity. Nevertheless, in some ways, if we select the right metrics, then we are fulfilling our mission. So it really isn't about should the state be requiring this, it's about what should we be doing. So I know there's going to be more publicity in the next couple of weeks about that, and I wanted you to know about that, and then think about that in the context of what you're going to see today. The second thing I want to do is I want to introduce someone that by the end of today's session, as you leave, I want all of you to introduce yourselves, and he will remember all of your names, I am quite certain. But we have a new legal counsel, Kurt Samuelson, right here. And welcome. You may have seen his name, and hopefully none of you have appeared before him in his court, as he is retired recently from or resigned, I guess retired is not the right word, from the court as a justice in our court system. But he joins us as a Colorado Springs person with a lot of commitment to our region. And so I want all of you to know, because the one thing we've been telling Kurt all the way along is that many campuses and many organizations have an environment where you see the attorney when something is terribly wrong. And of course that also occurs here from time to time. But mostly we want our attorney and our legal counsel to really help us shape ways to get things done. We want it to be a positive interaction, and so it's very important that he get to know all of you and the different roles that you play. So when you see him on campus, go introduce yourselves. Again, I was kidding a little bit about him remembering all of the names today, but we do want him to feel welcome on our campus, Kurt, and we also want for you to get to know him as well. So now, without any more messages, I'm going to turn it over to Homer Wesley, and we're going to learn about all of the wonderful things we're engaged with students.
All right, guys, I feel like I'm talking to the choir. We've got a group that's probably heard at least a significant part of this message before, but we can go back over it today and talk about our enrollment picture as it is for this fall and summer. So that's our focus. Of course, a big part of that is always retention, so I wanted to put enrollment update up here, but we tend to sort of separate that out, and indeed there are some particular strategies around that that are very, very important to us, and that's a big piece of this enrollment picture. So let's begin by talking about some very positive trends that we've seen recently, in particular with the fall semester, but also some issues that deserve our attention. So we're looking at this really, really positive picture, but we want to take a drill down look, a more detailed look at this as well, and to talk about our plans for the future and how important it is that we continue to look at this detail in terms of enrollment over the next 8 years as we plan for this university. So we want to walk you through the enrollment numbers for fall and summer semesters because it brings up some very, very important points. Barbara Gaddis is going to talk about retention and some things that we've identified and some things that we're doing in that regard. And then we want to emphasize, now John Martinez has emphasized that I'm not to touch too many buttons here, but I think I got the right one. We want to focus on these 3 things as we talk about enrollment. Our summer enrollment, which we'll give you a little bit more detail about in a minute. El Paso County new freshman enrollment. Now, to be honest, that's El Paso new student enrollment, but we're going to talk about freshmen and then retention. And those are 3 very important elements that deserve our attention as we plan for the future and really as we work through the detail of next year's budgets and assessment of how we're doing. We have, for many, many years, looked at registration counts, our student credit hours as we moved into that enrollment cycle, and we've looked at that overall and by college, but that's about the detail that we've gone into our enrollment. We want to take a closer look at that in order to give ourselves a better idea of exactly where we are at each point throughout the year so that we can better plan for strategy, how we might apply different activities to that enrollment and retention work that we do, and to plan our budgets out. And you'll see exactly how we're going to look at those areas of focus more deeply. Now, all of this is so important because so much of our budget is self-generated. And you've heard Brian and Pam talk about this to a great extent, that what we depend on today is pretty much what we do, self-generation of budgets. And in that regard, to take Brian's work and to say that of our general operating funds for this past fiscal year, that 61% of our budget, of the general fund budget, came from resident tuition. You can add another 18%, I think, in terms of fees and out-of-state budgets as well. So that's a big part of what we do. And also, if you look at our all funds budget, you should recognize that less than 10% of our funding is coming from the state. Historically, sort of where we've looked at our budgets and what we plan for, really this is much about us and what we do, not counting auxiliaries and gifts and research on this campus. It is a huge part of where we are and what we will be able to do as we plan for this 2020 strategic plan. So this enrollment picture, this retention picture is about where we are. And more than just where we are in terms of at the end of the year, you know, the great sin would be for us to show up next August and to say, well, you know, we were talking about this last October and we did nothing about it. This sort of detail, this sort of review that we hope to talk about in the future will give us the ability to react and to positively move forward and plan for our future in that regard. Fall, of course, has been very, very positive, and our enrollments continued to climb. You could have picked several years back. I just sort of picked this up at 2002, but we have continued to see positive growth for the fall. That's a 31.6%, almost 32% increase since 2002. Phenomenal growth, and speaks to the strength and the attractiveness of this university well beyond my tenure here. And of course, this sort of growth does push us, but what I would term is very consistent, appropriate, strategic, manageable growth. Again, it pushes us, but it's the sort of growth that we can handle to continue to offer the sort of experience that we've offered at UCCS that has been attractive to those students who take a look at us from El Paso County, certainly from Colorado, and even outside the state. We're becoming an increasingly desired destination, that is UCCS. So this is our picture for today, very, very positive as we talk about fall. And that sort of wraps everything around it. But we were surprised by some things that happened in the summer. Now this is just but one end of term summer enrollment report, and it gives you some breakdown in some different areas. But this shows that at the bottom, a decrease of about 70 student credit hours over what we brought in the summer of 2011 of about 18,450 hours. So that is a 0.4% enrollment decrease. Now that doesn't seem so big if we talk about 0.4%, except that we were really anticipating to see the growth that we had seen in the fall and spring semesters at 5%. We anticipated that sort of growth for the summer. So as we came out of the gates and we looked at those overall reports that I've already mentioned, that student credit hour report, SCH report, that we begin to sort of pick up as students begin to register for a particular semester, we were up significantly at that point. We had been up in the fall and we'd been up in the spring, and we saw application reports indicating a big increase in the number of new students who were applying and being admitted to the university. So when we saw where we ended up, that really was not what we had anticipated nor what we had budgeted for at the same time. And just quite frankly, it was an oversight. An oversight that we hope to avoid in the future by providing more detailed reporting throughout the year that will help us to identify trends, to react with strategy if needed, and to appropriately plan our budgets throughout the year. Summer was a big surprise for us, and there were all kinds of reasons that we can talk about summer being down, and we're continuing to explore those. Brian Burnett is leading a group of us to talk about more specifically some detail about what we can look at, where we need to plan for the future, and where we might put our resources. But as an example, accompanying the decrease that we saw in the summer decline of 0.4%, we saw a decline in federal grant allocations of over $570,000 for our students that had been compared to the previous summer. So looking at the summer of 2011 and the summer of 2012, $570,000+ less available to individual students than had been available last year. Now that's not anything that UCCS decided. It's not anything the state decided. It was a federal guideline, a federal move that discontinued year-round Pell Grants that had been available for the fall, spring, and summer semesters for students that desired to enroll in the summer semester for the summers of 2010 and the summers of 2011. It was not an option prior to that and will not be an option in the future. So that's something we do not expect to see change, and certainly something that we think has impact on our summer enrollment, but quite frankly, something we talked about a little bit, but we really didn't build that into the summer model. And we need to look at that for the future as we look at that detail and plan so that we can more appropriately plan strategy and plan for appropriation of available resources and budget funds. Now, the fall was very, very positive, almost all around. An average of about 5.5% growth in the student credit hours, right around 5% for head count at that point, and lots of positive trends throughout all these numbers. Now, you can see a little bit more detail there if you'd like, and we can send this out if you want to look at this in more detail. But new freshmen up by 7%. New transfers up by almost 13%, continuing up by 4.3%, which is sort of speaking to our replacement value for future years. That means it will be easier, although through hard work, for us to sort of reach these fairly lofty goals we've set for ourselves. Undergraduates up by 6.2%, minority enrollments very positively up by 14.3%. And significantly, non-resident, this is a head count piece, up by 20%, which certainly supplements that tuition model that we talked about initially. Now, that is pretty remarkable given that we believe this fall most institutions within Colorado are down. That's at both the 2-year and the 4-year level. There are some exceptions to that, but really not very many. So that sort of decline in enrollment has been something that we can be proud of, and I think is reflective of some very hard work of certainly people in this room who are directly connected with this whole enrollment picture, but also throughout the entire university community. We believe very much that this recruitment retention effort is a university community-wide commitment, and we think that we're up because of some very positive things that we have done, not to mention exceptional vision, exceptional leadership from the leadership team in terms of budgeting, sort of outlook, and investments in this university in a way that have allowed us to continue to move forward in an environment of declining state resources as well. Very, very positive picture as we compare ourselves nationally. We know that graduate enrollments are down nationally as well. So you guys have done an exceptional job. But even within this very positive enrollment picture for fall, we've had some surprises as well. So this is sort of reflective of that detail that we begin to want to look at, to begin to have a better picture of where we think we're going to end up in the end. So let me see if I can walk you through that. This is an application grouping that sort of takes through applications, matriculations being not what you typically think of as matriculation, but admission, just because that's the way we define it within ISIS, and then those who enrolled, and what that yield picture is like in the end. So eventually that sort of get to the right of that chart, you begin to see who showed up in different groups. So we saw application increases across the board for transfers up about 30% as we ended the year, but we were up almost 60% in freshman applications as we came to the end of the year. And as we began to sort of get into the spring semester, we tried to do some projections about what we could expect to happen at that time. And if we took our historical yield rates, about 24%, and applied that to what we typically saw show up, that is enroll, from those who applied, we could have predicted as many as 2,000 new freshmen on campus. As we began to look at those numbers, that was a shocker. And we began to ask ourselves exactly how are we going to pull something like that off. So in an effort to offer a little more validity to that predictive value, then we chose to categorize our freshman applications and transfers and graduates into other groupings. So we looked at including some things that you don't see here, but outside of Colorado, that is out of state, Colorado, but not local, not Colorado Springs, typically El Paso County, and then a local group, El Paso County. And so that sort of gave us a different picture that brought those numbers down just a little bit, but would have given us a little larger number than we saw show up in the fall semester. So in the end, we saw our out-of-state enrollment of freshmen up by about 60% over last year. Big growth. In fact, that growth drove our freshman numbers for the fall, and that overall increase of about 7% that I've mentioned was driven in large part by this out-of-state market, which we've really worked and focused with over the past year. The Colorado market was also up, and that seems to be an area that other schools throughout the state had a problem with, but we were up about 9.5% in enrollment from those freshmen who were from Colorado but not the local market. What surprised us was being down 3.8% in El Paso County in terms of enrollment of new freshmen. Now, that's despite being up in applications, which you can see listed here by about 21%, and then up in acceptances of about 14.5%, a number that would have sort of sustained that enrollment projection of new freshmen that we were looking for. But in the end, we had a decline. Now, we're in the business of examining that more closely, but that's important for at least a couple of reasons, if not many, many more. One, it's always been our base of enrollment growth, this local market. And if you look at this more closely, and down at the bottom here, Colorado Springs, you can see we also saw a decline in every other area that you see listed there, from transfers to graduate markets as well. That local market did not yield for us in the way that we had anticipated, despite having a lot of initial interest. And we need to take a really good, hard, close look at that. So that's traditionally been our base for growth, and we definitely can't say, well, we'll pick it up out of state and ignore that. We want those other markets, need those other markets to work well for us. But we need El Paso County to come back in a way that we expected. And then secondly, and importantly, philosophically, it is our mission to serve southern Colorado, and El Paso County being a large part of that. And our ability to serve those students that have been historically underserved and provide access to higher education is an important part of what we do. Potentially, we'd have the ability to grow outside of this area if that was all we were concerned about. But it's an important part of what we are and what we're about and what we expect to continue to do. So this is sort of the enrollment numbers picture. And you know, as we talk about most of this, it's a focus on new student growth. And we put a lot of effort and resources into this growth. But if we don't focus on retention, then we're going to be spinning our wheels. We're going to be doing a lot of work and not really see the enrollment growth that we hope to have through 2020. And we're not going to be doing the things that we are called to do, that is bringing those students to our institution who fit and who would benefit from what it is we have to offer. So we want to talk to you a bit about retention as well, and I'll turn it over to Barbara Gaddis at this point. I'll push the first button for her.
Well, Homer had a lot of numbers and everything, and so my direction was not to do a lot of numbers. So I'm going to talk more qualitatively about things, and then I'm hoping we can brainstorm and talk about different things as well. This is uncomfortable.
I just need you at the mic. Thank you.
I'm always afraid I'll start singing in front of yeah, please, I'm sure you will. So, at any rate, one number that really is important, though, is our retention rate. And this graph here, if you look at it, shows a trend over the years. This is our historical retention. Last year, we were at 71%. This year, it is at 66%. Now, if it's full-time, and retention is defined as the percentage of full-time, first-time freshmen who are enrolled by census date 1 year, that following year at census date. So when we look at just full-time, our retention rate is 67%. 66% is what's listed up here because that's actually the number of students that we kept. Now, if you look, you can pick up a couple of other things from the trend too. One of the things we did this year is we really retained more students than we ever have before. It just, we had more students here, and so the percentage retention is lower. We had our biggest class ever. We had 1352 first-time freshmen, and this year it's an even bigger class, 1447, so we'll have our challenges cut out, and we want to look at some of the areas here that really help us. One of the things that I want us to look at is who our freshmen are. I told you it's our biggest class, it's 1352. We had really well qualified students. Most of our students really had, quite high academic preparation coming in. Our average ACT math score was 22.7. Average ACT English was 22.9. Average high school GPA was 3.25. Average index score was 107. And so our students really were qualified to go to a number of different schools, and they chose to come to UCCS. On the other hand, we admitted more students who are in the window. Our index score is 92, and we can admit students below that, and Anthony and the LAS Admissions Committee and a number of people look at those applications individually to see if they can pick out students with the motivation, with the background, who will be successful here, and that's a very difficult job. But last fall, we ended up admitting 11.2% of students with index scores below. Now, that has some implications for retention as well and for some of the services we want to provide. Okay, so who we do retain, I think I skipped quickly over some things by hitting the buzzer. So let me try it. Okay, so a couple other things I want to point out is our majors. So undecided students comprise our largest number of students, on campus. That's true this coming year as well. Pre-majors, and pre-majors are students who've applied to be accepted to one of the professional colleges here, but do not have the academic qualifications to be admitted. They go to LAS and they're admitted into LAS as a pre-business, pre-engineer, pre-nursing. So that's our second group of, of high prevalent majors. And then biology is in there, psychology is the sixth one, etc. So of the top 6, really only 2 are declared majors. Okay. The other thing that's good is most of them took freshman seminar. So about 3/4 of the students took freshman seminar. About 40% of the students live in housing. So that's good, when we're looking for retention. We have needy students. So about 63% are Pell eligible, and that has some implications for retention. And that's kind of just a general guideline of who our students were that we were working to retain last year. Okay, so who do we retain? We do a really good job with a number of different students. One is those students who are qualified to come. So students who have higher index scores, students who have higher high school GPAs. We retained our honor students at 98%, which was great. CLC, Chancellor's Leadership Class, has really high retention. And there's a linear relationship between a student's index score and how they are retained. There's a dip somewhere, and I'll talk about that dip in just a minute. But generally, students who have higher academic preparation coming to school end up being retained to a higher degree. We also do really well with students who do well their first semester. Now, some of that absolutely is tied to their academic preparation coming in, and in general, students with higher academic preparation do better, their first year. But there are other things as well that really impact that, like getting students into the right classes, taking freshman seminar, working, having high academic expectations and working towards that, etc. Okay, John, what did I do?
You pushed it.
Okay. We don't do that. Okay, I'm not going to touch the button. See, I should stand behind here. Okay.
I'm not really sure how to use the C there.
Okay, well, you don't. I'll tell you what it says below that. Okay, cool. But the other things, sorry. The other group that we really do a good job retaining are really at-risk students who come in and get the support that they need. One group in particular is the Gateway. It used to be called the C3 Learning Community, and we have retitled it Gateway because we see this as the gateway that they have to getting a college degree. These are the very high-risk students. So if this is 92, this is our index, our window goes down to 82, and we have a floor below that. Anthony takes those very lowest index score students, and we require them to be in this learning community. They take a freshman seminar class, they take Key Warner's sociology class, which is a 2000 level class, and high academic expectations. They meet every few weeks with Anthony, with other support, with academic advisors. They are required to get support. They are retained to a far higher degree than students with even higher index scores. And so that tells us that if we can, get the students, make them connect with the help that they need, we can really meet our mission of providing access and helping students be successful. Other things we've done along this line is with learning communities, and we've designed learning communities for high-risk pre-majors and requiring them to be in the learning community. Students who participate for the pre-major, much higher retention, much higher grades. It's a really good process that works. Other things, other ways of providing support are through the mentoring, faculty-staff mentoring program, taking freshman seminar, doing all these things. And I'll talk about early alert in just a second. Okay, so where do we have problems? The problems we have are really in our biggest group of students. So undecided students, it's the biggest major last year. It's the biggest major for this coming year up. And it's a really interesting group of students. On the one hand, you have undecided students who are really gifted, have lots of interest. There's so many things that they can do that it's kind of hard to pin them down and say, do this, rather than this. So that's one type of undecided student. Another type of undecided student doesn't really know what they want to do and, really don't like anything and, haven't really found anything to excite their passion. So that's different and requires a different way to work, with the students. So undecided we do struggle with, and they have a much lower retention rate. Only 58% of the students are here now. Okay, pre-major students. Pre-major students, again, are those students who couldn't get admitted to the colleges, who want to be that, but they lack the academic skills to really make them succeed in the classes they need to take to get admitted to that. Very low rate of retention. We did a really big study several years ago looking at how many people started with a pre-major, how many went on and then graduated either in that major or graduated, and it is really small. So it's clearly a way that we have to do more outreach to and help these students find something that they will be successful in, help them being retained so they can go on. Our other group is window admitted students, and again, those are people below our index score. When we tell people, we really want you to go and do this, we want you to take freshman seminar, we want you to take, we want you to go to one of the academic centers for excellence, which is the new name for the Excel centers. We want you to do these things. as Homer says, freshmen really don't do optional. They don't do that. We know if they do, they will be successful. So we need to figure out a way to make that a mandatory part of what they do, either through coursework, either through admissions, some way there. And students who take a high-risk class and are not successful. What do you think the high-risk classes are on campus? Chemistry, now come on. Anatomy and physiology. Last year, only a third of the pre-nursing students who took A&P got a C or higher. Most got D's or F's or dropped. 2/3 of the nursing prep, who are the students who were admitted, to the Bethel and have higher GPAs, etc. So 2/3 of those were successful. Freshmen who don't do well in anatomy and physiology, a lot of times are not going to become nurses, and a lot of times that's fine. If we can, actually, and for our health, it may be very, very good. But what we need to do is really help them find something that really does fulfill, and meets their talent. So that's a challenge that we have. The other, and we did a study several years ago looking at high-risk classes, and the top 9 of 10 were college algebra sections. Math has done a lot this time looking at diagnostic tests, trying to get people into the classes that meet their level, of experience, and so we're finding some success there. But we know that freshmen who don't do well in these classes end up thinking, I'll do better if I go somewhere else, and they kind of give up and then leave. So we want to make sure we work with that. Okay, students who don't take freshman seminar don't do as well. Freshmen who don't use any of the centers don't do as well. We know that from years and years of data. Okay, so then the question is, based on all this, what can we do? Because you guys, we've got the same constraints this year. Our biggest major for this group is undecided students. Our next ones are pre-major students. So we have a lot of the very same risk factors that we did last year and the previous year, etc. So some of the things that we're talking about, and I want to kind of throw it out to you guys for ideas, as well, is, being able, one, to mandate if we accept someone that they have to do something to get support. We're calling those conditional admissions. We're going to do it very positively, and we see this as being a very positive stance. This is not punitive in any way. It's saying we recognize, you have great potential. These are the things that, that freshmen need to do to be successful, and then we'll work with that. And that seems to be working well this semester with what we've already started to do. And that relates to requiring at-risk students. We're going to do more tracking as well. We know that the more risk factors a student has, the more risk they are for retention and low GPA. So we're going to be following people with multiple risk factors early in the year so we can provide support. Placement testing, I talked about. We really want to work more with our undecided students, and I got a couple undecided students in my freshman seminar class this year, and they're really kind of going through agony right now because they feel like they should know what they want to do. They don't have to, and students will change their majors, multiple times, but somehow not having something that you can say, I am studying X, I'm going to be, Y, is really a problem for them, and we want to help provide more outreach to help them with this decision. We want to use more and encourage more faculty to use the early alert system. This is a system that faculty in 1,000 and 2,000 level classes notify us about students who aren't doing well, who have missed exams, missed classes, aren't turning in assignments. And they let us know, and then we and the academic advisors and other groups on campus outreach to them and connect them with the resources, sit down, figure out what the problem is, help them figure out solutions to help them get back on track. Last year, students who had 1 or 2 alerts and took advantage of the resources, did something, didn't just say, yeah, I've got alerts and ignored us, they were retained to the very same extent as people who didn't have alerts. So if we can get people early, we can help them and they can be successful. So we want to do more of that. So any deans, we want to really encourage your faculty to do that. And then we really want to, do more connecting of faculty and staff with, directly with freshmen. That's through the mentoring program and through a lot of you in your offices and everything else. And I've told the story about 80 times, but I really, really like it. And I had a graduate student doing a study. So she got, names of, like 200 different students and called them all during spring break and, a couple of weeks before and after. And she kept calling, so she really got, I think, all but 2 people. I mean, it was a massive undertaking. At any rate, so there were kind of 2 groups of students. She asked them a variety of different questions. The major difference between the 2 groups, the students who were retained and the students who weren't retained, is that the students who were retained could come up with a faculty or staff member's name or description that had made a difference. So when the question was, was there someone on campus that you really connected to, and who was it? People could come up with an answer for the group of the students who were retained. Some of the answers were really bizarre, like Naprikowski. I can't even tell you how that came across, but they knew someone, even if they couldn't spell it correctly. So, and a lot of times they didn't even know names, but they could describe people, what their role was. And she dug a little deeper, with one of the students and said, well, what did this person do? Why do you remember this person and why was this important? And the answer was, because every time I saw him when I was walking on campus, he smiled at me and said, hello. How hard is that? You guys do that, as a part of your daily course. So in conclusion, I really want to thank you for everything you've done, for everything you will do. Let me stress the will do, okay? Because by your role in your offices, in your role as faculty, whether you work with freshmen, whether you work with students, directly or indirectly, you really make a big impact on students and on the campus. And most of the time, I don't think you'll know what impact you made until way after, this is over. So my final slide is the most critical factor influencing retention is you. So thank you very much.
So I've got to get back up here. Any questions about any of that material or thoughts about what we can do differently and what we ought to take a look at?
Did I hear you right, Robert, that 63% of our freshmen are Pell eligible?
Yes. So the question was how many of our freshmen are Pell eligible, and I think we've got affirmation from our Director of Financial Aid that yes, that's
Well,
true.
it was Pell, it was all financial.
All financial aid eligible is 63%. And what's Pell eligibility then?
Pell eligibility was like 43.
43%
Yes.
for Pell eligibility.
All Pell aid.
So how many of them are on Pell? 43% are on Pell or no?
Yes.
43% of our students are on Pell.
Yeah, it was 433 students were Pell eligible out of our freshman class. So.
And the retention rates are really similar between Pell eligible and the non-Pell eligible. We're doing a bunch of analysis, looking at scholarships, looking at work study, looking at different reward levels.
So the retention rates among those Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible, those with the greatest need and those who don't demonstrate need, it's a pretty minimal shift. but both are below that 71% that we're looking at. I think one of the things that Barbara has done a great deal of analysis and will continue to do some work about where we are with retention. In almost all of our groups that we've typically looked at, we saw a little bit of a drop. We saw a drop in retention almost in any group that we've analyzed from last year to this. So it wasn't any one particular area that shifted. It was a shift sort of throughout the whole freshman 2011 cohort. So as you see that number, that's that group of freshmen who started last fall or summer. Keith.
Two questions. One is about the students from the population from Colorado Springs. I'm just curious, are they going to school somewhere else, or is this just a drop-off in training?
So the question about what happened to these El Paso County students, freshmen, and as we saw the transfer and graduate numbers as well, we don't know for certain, and that's what we want to take a look at. We did see interest throughout the process. Applications, admission certainly would have helped us fulfill the expectations that we had. We did talk with some representatives from Pikes Peak yesterday, and they saw an increase of new freshmen from El Paso County of 450 students in their class, and 54 of those were full-time, which is a big distinction for them. So we were laughing yesterday and saying that's where our 31 students went. Now the other piece of that is we did see an increase of about 15 freshmen in the summer, and many of those were local students as well, so that would mediate that a bit. But still, we look for a 15% increase is what we're really looking for, and that's
this whole undecided. See, it's such a kind of a crummy label to be able to give yourself people. I can just imagine somebody saying, "Oh, you're going to school. What's your major? Oh, I'm an undecided." I'm wondering if there's examples or models where, in a way, there's a forced choice, so that undecided is not an option, but maybe students need to choose an exploratory major or something along those lines. And I'm just curious if that's a model that's been used in other places.
So what could we do about this undecided moniker and then the pre-majors as well?
The pre-majors as well, and we've had several signs on our doors, and we did call it exploratory, for a while. And the problem is nobody knew what it was, and so we kind of, went back because undecided is kind of more standard. The other thing I hate is the abbreviation LSUD. I'm an LSUD. I mean, doesn't that just sound bad? That's the abbreviation for undecided. So.
But I mean, couldn't they actually, as they register as freshmen, have to choose something other than undecided?
We could, or kind of, like force them into.
So it could be maybe exploratory chemistry or exploratory.
I think that would be difficult to do. Pam, do you want to drop in?
What is done around the nation is your general studies.
Right. Or university college, or something. Yeah.
And that sort of thinking sort of plays around our pre-majors as well. So we know that even students with higher index scores who would predict well within a major for retention have lower retention rates just by their association with these pre-majors, pre-engineering, pre-nursing, pre-business. So we can explore this same idea around that thinking as well. It seems that there is just some correlation between what people view, how people view themselves, and the retention rate here. So that is an area that we think we might be able to do something with. But that's a processing issue that could move things along rather quickly.
The other thing I'd really like to do, and haven't really run this out yet, is the learning communities have been really successful. The problem is logistically it's really difficult to manage and really tedious and really takes a lot of time. So one of the things we thought about with the conditionally admitted students is if we could put them into a series of classes. So if they took, this class at this time, and this class at this time, and this class, then what we've done is we have a learning community. We can provide support to the classes, that will be a really efficient model. And if we could do something like that, it would make it really, really easy. So I'm hoping we can think about that and see if that's a way to go in the future. I just wanted to work that in. So.
Well, and this is a bit premature as well. So one of the things that Pam has encouraged us to look at is Arizona State's programming around retention, and they do a tremendous amount. They're talking about retention rates moving from 87 to 90%, and they're in a bit of a different
But they started
part.
where we were.
Well, it started where we were, but they have put a tremendous amount of resource, but time and effort. And one of the things that they do with some success is around the success coaching. And they have made some inroads with phone calls and meetings with students that they've identified as at risk, which we've sort of identified here as well, to talk about goals and planning around how they might be more successful on a campus. Anything from saying what are your priorities, or how do you use your time, or where do you want to be. And then we think we can sort of supplement this idea with what they may not be in as this sort of university studies program, or sort of accepted directly into the university but not into a pre-major, but also talk with them more personally about some of their struggles and challenges, and help them set some goals. So we've explored that option, and we're ready, I think, to propose that to the leadership team and see if we can move some of that forward.
And the Jump Start program?
Jump Start program,
yeah, from
we will.
ASU too. The other thing that they do that we've really wanted to do for a long time is, particularly for the students who are the conditional admissions or the G qualifiers, the ones who don't have that strong academic background, is they have their students come to campus, a week or 2 weeks, ahead of time, stay in housing and take classes. So they're jumping in with their math class. They're jumping in with this much smaller scale. They have a lot of individual work, a lot of individual tutoring, but by the time school starts, even a week or two later, they've kind of gotten some things under their belt, and that looks like that is working well. Arizona State is wonderful. They're really doing a lot of neat things.
Yes.
A lot of the information today is about academic retention and what we can do to retain students academically. What are your thoughts on retaining students through student engagement and on campus?
Sorry. So the question is, a lot of what we've looked at is academics and what we can do academically or in that arena. And so what are our thoughts about getting students engaged on the campus in clubs and organizations and everything else as well? A lot of times we look at academics, and particularly because we have a big commuter population and everything else, and it's easier to get data on that. We're now going to be doing a new program, where we're going to be able to track SIDs. So we really will be able to get data on student engagement. Now, frankly, my thought, and from interviews and from surveys where students have responded and everything else, my sense is it plays a huge role. It's just we're not able to say, okay, students who got engaged got, X, et cetera. It's something we will be able to do. Did you want to?
Well, just to ask you a question before you step away. So I also want to emphasize that we've got a big commuting population as well that plays into this. So our commuting retention and our on-campus retention, those who are most engaged, is about what? Do you remember those numbers?
I don't, sorry.
So
yeah.
Well, I'll have to ask a question and we don't have an answer. But that the retention rate among those who commute is lower than those who are...
I'm sorry. I totally misunderstood where you were going. Yes. So in housing, it's 68.3. For commuter students, it's 63.8. So the housing students are, have a higher rate of retention. I also would argue that they also are more engaged, and I would also argue that they have kind of better academic support because the RAs are really looking out for them and everything else, you know, as well. So a number of reasons that we expect housing to do better, and they do, so.
How about student employment? Are you tracking that if they have a job?
We can track work study, and work study, huge difference. You know, I mean, students who have work study, and there were only 44 students, I think, last year, so it's a small number, really retained, you know, I mean, you know, 78 or something. I mean, it was a really good retention rate. We don't have access or easy access to student employment or just working on campus apart from work study. It seems like we should, and it's something we keep talking about, you know, looking at and doing. And again, with no data except for students commenting and from surveys and from more, you know, conglomerate data, is I think it makes a big difference. It's knowing someone on campus. It's being connected, you know, to someone on campus who cares about you, who can connect you to the resources and, you know, provides that support.
Can I add one point to that? So as we talk, we've added some funding. Brian and Pam put some more money into work study this past year. But the one thing we really haven't focused on is exactly where that goes. So retention rates, this cohort, is a focus on the freshman to sophomore retention rate. As I talk anecdotally to students, a lot of those students are still struggling to find work on campus because there's such competition. So we really haven't focused that part of a retention effort on freshmen, I'd say very, very clearly. And then we probably have time for one more question, and I think that'll sort of exhaust our time. Any more questions? Yes.
Nobody else has. It's just, I'm thinking that with the work that's happening right now on general education, it might really be a great time to create an idea around university studies or whatever that helps bring in some of these students that have not hooked up with a major yet, and also kind of is connected with where we're going in terms of our general education program.
And freshman seminar is a part of those discussions that would be required for all students. I would urge, as we think through that, we recognize the importance that freshman seminar plays in our retention rates. Again, it sort of helps overcome some great deficiencies, and part of that effort is the ability to truly engage a student and to get them involved in a community in a way that helps them make a very successful transition. So as we talk about this new gateway course, I think making certain that we preserve some of those, the best qualities of the freshman seminar class is going to be strategically very, very important. All right, guys, I think we have run out of time, and we'll hang around to answer other questions. Thank you very much.